podcast about personal financial topics aimed at improving conversations about money in your marriage so you can reach your dreams together. This is a weekly discussion brought to you by a seemingly financially incompatible couple bonded by the legal contract of marriage. My name is David, your favorite saver, and I'm joined today by the spender who never disagrees with me, of course, Heather.
That's correct.
I have it on record here, folks. So now we can go back and play the tape the next time that she thinks that she's disagreeing with me. I'll remind her that she's not. So today we have a wonderful show planned. Today we're going to be talking about how to appropriately disagree and resolve conflict with your spouse about money.
I don't really think we should talk about that today. So I want to talk about how to find the best travel deals. So I think I actually do disagree with you.
Oh, okay. Well, why don't we have a conversation about why we think we disagree on this and go from there and see if we can come to some kind of resolution.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe we should start with talking about exactly why this is an issue.
Because travel deals are more exciting than talking about disagreements.
Hey, I want to travel. If you see some travel deals right now, I am more than happy.
I guess you're right. It's not really relevant right now. So, all right, we'll talk about disagreement.
More than happy.
Blah, blah, blah. You win.
Oh, boy.
There you go, people. That's how you disagree.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Yeah. You just have a fuddy-duddy like me shut it all down, apparently. No, I would love to go traveling. As soon as COVID is up and I am allowed to travel more than 8 miles away from my apartment, I will be traveling. Oh, my goodness. We've done a lot of episodes, Heather, on the need for healthy dialogue, on communication. And we've talked a lot across multiple topics around how these topics can bring up disagreements. They can bring up conflict. And there are 1,001 ways that I'm sure people can deal with these different topics, but we haven't gone into a lot of detail yet on a few of those ways.
Yeah, I hope that our listeners, they're probably sitting there arguing with their spouse and wondering, how do we do this? How do we disagree? Da 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 da! Here we come to save the day.
Oh boy. I think you might be giving us a little too much credit as the savior of all these marriages out there. It's possible also that you are having healthy conversations around it, but just want a little bit more, a couple more tips maybe. It's getting some thoughts on how others have approached it. We
might be a bit experts in this area.
We've certainly disagreed. We've had different approaches for a long time about how to handle money pretty much across the board. It's funny because I don't remember a lot of the details of our arguments on this. And I don't know.
The point is we got through it.
But we have got through it. We've gotten through it. I'm sure we'll have more conflicts, though. Don't worry. But money disagreements, I feel like, can oftentimes feel like personal attacks because money is so personal. Money is what you spend your time building up. You spend hours upon hours, thousands of hours working to get money. You invest your life in it. You go to school. You get an education to get money. You do all these things to get money. Your livelihood depends on it. So when somebody has a different point of view, it can feel very personal.
Yeah, and I think especially when you're arguing with your spouse, because your spouse is like the most important person to you. So you're talking with the most important person to you, and then it's about money, and it's so hard not to separate the person from what they're saying when you're talking to someone so special like that on such a topic that can be so personal, like you said.
Yeah, because they know all the hot buttons to push too if they want to. If they want to manipulate you, they're the ones that can manipulate you the easiest. They know where all the skeletons are in the closet. The bodies are buried, and so to speak. Do we have any bodies buried in the backyard?
We'll have to edit this part out.
Oh. Oh, yeah. So we want to avoid unhealthy conflict whenever possible. We don't want to avoid conflict. We don't want to avoid discussing these things, because these are critical things to be discussing and to be understanding each other on.
Exactly. Conflict is gonna come up. If you think, oh, we're just never gonna have conflict, that's not realistic. That's not reality. So we want to give you tools to how to do it healthy. We do not want this to lead to divorce, as we've said on a lot of these. And the whole reason of this podcast is money can become such a contentious issue that it can lead to divorce, and that is definitely where we don't want it to go.
And I've met couples that have said, oh, my spouse and I, we never argue about anything. And I believe them. They probably don't. But what I'm guessing is that one of them is probably not sharing their feelings or not sharing their thoughts as much as the other would like to. So if you are one of those people that are like, oh yeah, my spouse and I, we always agree about everything, maybe you are that one in a million that actually is like that. Or maybe your spouse is just really quiet and is afraid to talk to you. So anyway, keep that in mind. Hopefully you can get to a point where you can be open and talk to them and get that insight to see if that's really what's going on. Conflicts can happen for a number of different reasons. And I think that one of the main drivers for them, at least it was for us, was having different backgrounds. We talked about it, I think it was many episodes ago, literally dozens of episodes ago, I think, when we talked about our introductions about how you and I, Heather, had very different backgrounds growing up.
Yeah, and I think this is really fascinating. Everyone has a different story. What's your story? What's your story? We all come from different backgrounds and situations growing up that have shaped us into who we are. And it's hard to truly understand someone's story and how it impacts them. It's taken me years of hearing David's story to understand, and sometimes I still don't even understand his aggressive need to save. I just can't. Sometimes the anxiety that David has around money is so real, and I know the stories and I know the background, but without not having that experience and not going through it, it's really it's hard, even if you know that story, to put yourself in that situation and to really relate to it.
And just to catch people up, for those that may not have heard the earlier episode, I talked a little bit, I think I talked a little bit about just growing up, how my family early on didn't have a lot of money. I was the kid that was on subsidized lunch. We had food stamps at a point. We were on, all the social programs in order to make ends meet, and state-sponsored healthcare and such before that was really before there was subsidized healthcare for all. And so it was, we didn't go on vacations. We didn't do any of that stuff. So it was a very different environment than Heather's upbringing, where she was able to do nice vacations and she had lots of presents, more than enough presents under the tree. And it was just a very, very different environment.
Yeah. And whether you realize it or not, I mean, your background and where you come from really shapes who you are and what you think about money and how you value and how you act around it. Whether you intentionally know it or not, it plays a big impact in how you approach
it shapes your
finances.
Normal. Yeah. And so that can generate conflict if you have different opinions or standards of what that normal is or what rational is.
Another thing that can really cause conflict is how you value things. So again, everybody's different and everybody values different things and what you're going to do with your money. Unless you married yourself, which I guess is possible, you are going to value different things. You will agree on some things, and it does take time to grow into it. David didn't really value a home. I think he just looked at it as, I need a place to live. I need to
stay dry and warm.
Yeah, and that was really it. And I think we both now agree on the type of home and what's important to us and value that. And then we've kind of come to an agreement on that. Another area is like, we now both value a good bottle of wine. And 10 years ago, neither of us would have said that we think that's important. So, but then there's other instances where I value things that you don't. Like, I value nice jewelry. Which, your wedding ring was what, like $250, $300?
$300.
I mean, yep. And it's great. You love it and you're fine with it.
I'm completely fine with it.
So my ring was a little bit more than $250. And that's okay. But
I think there are other areas where we've come together, like vacations, right?
Right.
Where I was very much, I don't need to go on vacation, or vacations should be incredibly small because of my background, as I mentioned, where we didn't go on any vacations. So going on one cheap vacation a year seemed very extravagant to me. And now I've come a long way from there, but I would say I'm probably still not quite to the same level that you are.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you're going to value different things. You're going to come from different places, and you're hopefully going to come to agreements. But I think the important part is understanding, what that person,
what they value. Yeah. And I think these values then lead to different goals potentially. And so we've had a previous episode also on goal setting, which I highly recommend you go back and listen to if you haven't already. If you and your spouse have different goals, you're essentially financially pointing in different directions, and you're either splitting financially so that you're not going to achieve both your goals as quickly as you would, or you're going to run into conflict as you need to make decisions around where money needs to go in order to reach those goals that one spouse isn't in support of. So get on the same page with goals.
Yeah, if you have listened to any of our podcasts, this continues to come up as a recurring theme. In fact, this is also advice that we've heard from a lot of the couples that we've had on and interviewed, that this really is a key part to getting aligned as a couple and being in a strong marriage.
Yeah, and thankfully, you and I, Heather, haven't struggled too much on the goal side, I feel like. Like we've been fairly aligned on goals, which I think has been very helpful early on in getting us pointed in the same direction.
Yeah.
So, as much issues as we've had on other things, overall goals have been pretty good. Secrecy can cause problems. We did a episode on transparency, and so secrecy, hiding or lying about money items to your spouse is certainly not a good thing. That'll generate conflict. I'm not sure that there's much more to say about that.
Yeah,
Go back to our episode.
This is so bad, right? I mean, secrecy is it's bad. I have hidden some small purchases and then come clean, and it did not go well. It was not worth that $50 unplanned happy hour not telling David about it. I should have told him. It was not worth the stress and the arguments that came out of it for hiding just a small thing like that. So this is just really bad.
And I think one of the things that we do also, or that can lead to it, are making assumptions. So we oftentimes feel like we assume that the other person thinks the same way we do, or has the same desires or the same goals or same values that we do. And this runs us into troubled waters, because not everybody's like me. Big surprise, right? Especially not my wife. She's not quite like me.
Everybody should be like you.
I like the sound of that, but it's not the way that life is. And so as much as we'd like the golden rule to apply, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, that doesn't really apply with finances, as not everybody's going to like it if I apply my finance rules to them, especially my wife.
Yeah. I mean, all I can say here is, what they say about assume. Just spell it
out. But I think as we talk about all these conflicts, we need to remember there's a spectrum here, right? We could be talking about that $50 happy hour or a $5 Starbucks cup of coffee, or we could be talking about $200,000 of secret hidden debt, right? These are two very different things, in my mind at least. One is, we need to talk through it and work it out, and the other sounds like huge financial betrayal in my mind. So I think keeping that in perspective here is also valuable. That I think where we're talking about more so is on the smaller side of the spectrum. We are not going to be capable of talking about how do you deal with large financial betrayal that probably needs to involve a marriage counselor.
Yeah, we're not certified counselors here, so if it's a major issue like that, it's probably worth getting some professional help.
Right.
We want you to have a successful marriage.
Of course.
So there's a lot of different approaches now for addressing these disagreements and how to get through them. So first of all, it's really important to remain calm throughout the discussion, and assume positive intent. So this is something that I struggle with. Shocking. I know that I'm usually perfect one here, but this is actually just kidding. I'm
You
usually the one
are
with the issue.
quite perfect. Let's be honest.
Actually,
she's being humble.
It's funny because calm is actually my word for the year that I've chosen. It is something that I'm working on in my personal and my professional life, but it is a really good approach and necessary. And also, we should always try to assume positive intent in our partner. In this case, assume is a good thing.
So I think the lesson is to assume positive attributes.
Right.
Generally, right?
Right.
Let's assume positive intent. Let's assume that your spouse wants the best for you. Let's assume that they are on your side. And because we were talking about money is so emotional, it's so easy to assume that they want to keep you from doing something just because, or because they're selfish, or because they want control, or because there's a whole host of reasons. But if you're both assuming that the other person has your best interest in mind, these conversations are going to go so much better.
The next thing to do is to not judge.
Ooh, that's a hard one.
Do not be a judgy McJudgerton. Again, this is something that I'm guilty of. I am definitely strong J in the Myers-Briggs, if you're familiar with that. Which it's very good that I'm very self-aware of all these issues that I have so that I can make sure that I'm not that way.
I'm a J too. So, yeah, it is.
I don't even know what the other letter is.
But
is there another letter? I think it's just J. I think it's just
It's the big one. Big and bold. Yeah, I know. It's easy. For us, it's hard not to get judgy, but we can't judge, and we need to do this. We need to have these conversations, not judging and with a lot of grace, because if you come into a conversation, if your spouse, like Heather's example here of coming clean on a purchase, if you come in and you're like, oh my gosh, that was the worst thing in the world, I can't believe you did it. And I've done that. I'll come clean on that. I've not approached it well.
There's been some judgment rained down.
There's been some moments where I've rained down some judgment.
That's probably why there's been some more hidden happy hours.
But let's not have the hidden happy hours.
Not anymore.
But the point is that there should be some discussion of truth, right? There should be some, hey, this is bad behavior. We need to get away from this. But there should also be some grace in there where you're balancing out that truth with some grace, because you want your spouse to open up again in the future. And they're not going to do that if you come pounding on them about how terrible they were and how much they screwed up and all this stuff. So be careful with that.
Yeah. I mean, this is your spouse. This is your person in the world. So definitely have some grace.
And as you're doing that, as you're sharing that truth that's not judgy, but that's here's the facts. Also, it can be helpful to share how those facts make you feel. And I think it's important to differentiate between these are the facts versus these are my feelings about the facts, because your feelings about the facts are not the facts. And it can be very easy when you're in an emotional state to confuse the two.
Yeah, and this came up a lot early in our marriage, and this is why I don't like arguing with David, because I would have a lot of the feels and a lot of the feelings, and I would get emotional about things, and I would come to an argument, and then David would be like, well, 1 + 1 = 2. And I'd be like, but I feel like 1 + 1 = 78. And it was like, but the facts, Heather, are 1 + 1 = 2. And it was just like, and so it's good to share those feelings, but you need to separate between this is how I'm feeling and this is very real, but it's a feeling.
And it's important. It's important to share the feelings. It's fine to have the feelings.
Right.
You're going to have them. It's also important to put those in context and recognize their feelings. They're not necessarily fact.
Also, it's good to fess up to your mistakes. So don't just
This one's hard.
Just don't just point out what the other person did. Start with where you've made mistakes, take some ownership and accountability for your own actions. And that's going to go a long way to having the other person share theirs. Vulnerability is really huge and opens the door to making the other spouse and the other person feel that like they can fess up and come up that they're probably knowing what their mistakes are. So it's best to not come as accusatory, but confessing kind of what you've done.
Right. And being the first one to come up and confess your mistakes is really hard to take that first step. I don't know. I don't know. It's just awkward.
We probably should have started this podcast with, this is not going to be easy.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I kind of said this is a really hard one on all of them, haven't I?
So we're giving you guys some tips here, but
Gosh,
they might be difficult.
Yeah, maybe when you start out with these tips, you pick one of these.
This is kind of like advanced podcast. We've had some beginner podcasts and intermediary. This is kind of in the advanced. This is like PhD level here.
At least for me, it's PhD level. I'm sure some of the listeners out there are like, oh yeah, I do all of these. I did half of these just yesterday.
Well, and I feel like we kind of keep redoing them. Like we keep failing and repeating the course. We're getting more practice.
Right.
We're getting lots of practice.
Right. Well, and that's actually
practice makes perfect.
That's a really good point. Is that don't beat yourself up if you're not doing all of these, because we're not doing all of these and we're not doing them all on a regular basis.
Oh, come on, don't lie. No,
I mean, we're doing them all. We're perfect on everything. That's why we have a podcast about this, right? Because we're the experts. No, so what I'm saying is try not to beat yourself up when you're not doing this stuff, but recognize where you have room for that improvement, and maybe you're not doing great on the grace piece. That was something I needed to work on for a long time, and probably still need to. Okay, I do still need to work on, but I think it's important to recognize that and say, okay, this is the thing that I'm going to focus on for the next conversation that I have. If I can only do one thing better, this is the one thing I'm going to do a little bit better. Yeah. So there are some practical actions that I think we can take in order to implement all these approaches. And so we have a lot of great ideas here, but if you don't set the environment correctly in order to have these conversations aren't going to go well. And so I would highly recommend scheduling. That's right. I know. Actually, like maybe it's making an appointment with your spouse and say, hey, Tuesday at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. After the kids go to bed, we're going to have a conversation about this topic that we seem to be a little bit off on.
Send an Outlook invite. Yeah, I think
it doesn't need to be formal.
I know that sounds formal, but I do think it's good to prepare, because this is something that you don't want to just jump into, or you might have been preparing and having all this, but if you haven't told your spouse you're going to come up to it, then you haven't given them the time to kind of digest and prepare for it. So I think it's really helpful if you know, like, hey, we're going to have this conversation, and I think it'll go a lot smoother if you set aside the time and you prepare for it.
I know I really appreciate it when Heather does this. So sometimes Heather will say, oh, I have a question that I want to talk to you tonight about finances. I'm going to be asking you about it over dinner. I'm like, what is it? Oh, I want it to be a surprise. I'll tell you. No, it's not going to be a surprise. Tell me what the question is now. We don't have to talk about it now, but I'm going to need some time to think about it before we have this talk at dinner. And so I think that's really important. And then also, it gives you a chance, if this is an emotionally charged topic, it gives you time for whoever might be emotional about it to get their head around it and perhaps calm down and get those emotions under control. Maybe not calm down, but at least get those emotions under control before the conversation too.
So when you start the conversation, try not to just talk about numbers, but bring it back and talk about what you're really valuing, what the value of it is. As much as I love my numbers.
Ooh, and I love the numbers too.
I'm a big number nerd. The numbers aren't going to matter if you don't value the same thing. If one of you might as well be speaking about Mexican pesos and one of you speaking in euros, because If you don't have the same value of that item, it doesn't matter what the amount and the number of it is. You have to bring it back to what how much you value it and how important it is to you or to your spouse.
And talk about your goals. So talk about those goals. You'll get on the same page then as soon as you link those values up with those larger goals. Don't wait until you get upset. So I've seen this happen. I've done this as well, where something's boiling under the surface. There's something that's bugging you. It continues to build up. And you don't bring it up until it's too late, until it's become this huge issue. Maybe it's a small thing that's now become a huge issue. And if you get at the front of it, then it won't be a problem.
Yeah, this is not a good time to have a conversation when you are upset. Let me just tell you, speaking from experience, hopefully you can get to talk about this topic before it gets there. But if not, if you're upset, then wait until you have calmed down, going back to be calm when you have these conversations. We've experienced this when I've been upset about something, and I was so upset that the conversation did not go well. There were lots of tears. I was in no place to come to an agreement. I didn't even want an agreement. I was just hurt, and I wanted to hurt David, and that's just no bueno. Going back to the pesos. Not good.
Not good at all. But that is why I like the idea, and I think this was your idea, to close out these conversations with something positive. Right?
Yes.
So you had talked about, maybe we should do something romantic. Maybe we should go out for dinner. Maybe we should do something, I don't know, something special after these conversations as a reminder that, yes, we might have disagreements. We might not be on the same page all the time. But afterwards, after we have these hard conversations, we're able to get back together. We're able to do this as one and have a nice evening together.
Yeah, I love this idea, and we will have to give this a try and report back. Or maybe we won't report back, since it's a romantic.
What do you have in mind here for this evening? Whoa.
And last but not least, don't lie when you're in this conversation.
Oh, yeah.
This seems really obvious, but sometimes it is our job as podcast hosts to state the obvious. So you are welcome. That one comes free of charge.
Just along with the rest of this episode.
Good point.
By the way, if you paid anyone for this episode, you got ripped off. and could you send us a check too?
So we want you to continue to have this conversation with your spouse in a calm manner. So first, set up a money date conversation. I'm sure there's something around finances and money that you're not on the same page if you're human. It might be a purchase, a goal, etc. So set up time to have that conversation that you've been putting off and use some of the tips that we provided to talk about this issue in an appropriate, calm manner and come to a resolution. So David, we've talked a lot about our disagreements. We've had a few. Hopefully we've learned from them. So what is one thing that has not worked well when we've been in conflict? If you can think of something, that one might be a challenge. And then maybe think of one thing that has worked well.
Oh, so you want me to start with what has not worked well?
Yeah, let's start with the negative.
Then we can end on a high note.
That's right.
That's good. Okay. Well, something that hasn't worked well, and I hope this hasn't been spoiled too much, but from previous conversation, but it's talking about the issue when we're emotional. So I know you said typically you're the more emotional one. I get emotional too, but things escalate quickly when we're talking about money emotionally. One person might think that the other person's out to get them. One person might think that they're holding back, or the other person might think they're out of control, or it just gets harder to see things through the other person's perspective when we're tied up in our own emotions rather than trying to see things through the other person's eyes. And so if you're focused on your own emotions, you're not focused on the other person. And when you're having these difficult conversations, you need to be focused on the other person. So that's what's not worked well. What has worked well is, at least from my perspective, has been approaching the conversation with logic and numbers. So
What
at
about
least,
the value?
At least
Understanding the value.
and the value. So this helps me at least. And what I'm saying is when you come to me, Heather, with the logic and numbers, that helps me. So I'm thinking about times when maybe I'm being irrational. It helps me understand this is where we're at as a couple financially, and how this item, maybe this spending item, fits into our overall plan and values and goals, versus this is just another thing that we're spending money on and it's just money flying out the door. Putting it in the perspective of our overall goals and overall values helps ground me more, and that's been helpful.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Where are you at with this question?
So I think it's similar. I mean, what I was thinking was what's not gone well is when I point out what you're doing is wrong, or I devalue it and put down your actions, or even like refer to them as stupid. And that probably goes back to, again, not understanding the background or where you're coming from. But it also probably comes from an emotional state, to use kind of those harsh words. But I know that I've done that before, maybe once. It's kind of hard for me to admit publicly, but alas, I am not perfect. But yeah, when it probably is struck by emotions, but not understanding where you're coming from, and probably not using the best words to, or making you feel like what your opinion or your thoughts are, that they're not valuable or they're not smart. So yeah, on what has worked well, it's kind of the opposite of yours. It's when I can remove my emotion and come in calm. And when we enter a conversation or a disagreement and I really want to come to an agreement and find a solution and not just get my way. And again, I think that works well when, again, I can come, calm down, assuming positive intent and really working together towards a solution.
Oh, well, thank you so much for saying that. Those are some great thoughts, and
there we
couldn't
go.
agree more.
We aired the dirty laundry.
Now it's out
laundry.
there. We're not perfect. Oh, now our fans, the masses, the millions of followers, they're disillusioned because we're not perfect.
We're going to go do something romantic after this recording.
Well, I think that wraps up our conversation for today. We would love to hear how your conversations about money have gone, or take your questions on a future episode. Please email us at marriageandmoneypodcast@gmail.com, or message us on Instagram at marriage.and.money. Thanks again for joining us this week, and remember that whether you're a spender or a saver, your best financial life lies somewhere.